Hi, welcome again. You can probably skip this slide, right? So, we all have some drinks, and let's start a talk about Kotlin, and especially my experiences with using it at bol.com. I'm Alan. I work for bol.com only recently, like half a year or so. Before that I was a contractor, so I went to a lot of different companies, also bol.com as a contractor. But then I decided, well, I like the company so much, why I not just join bol.com and instead of playing contractor every year and then going away and coming back. So I am quite interested in some functional programming, all languages as well. I did quite some stuff in Scala, but after Java 8 I don't think there's not a lot of real usage for it anymore. Maybe for some cases it is, but I wouldn't use it all the time. And then recently I switched to a different team within bol.com. So we have about 60 teams or so, and I went to a different team. And then they told me we're using Kotlin. And I thought, oh, fuck. Here we have the cowboys, right? And because I remember somewhere in 2011 I was really into Scala, and then I know there was some announcement, I think, that we now want to develop yet another language on the JVM. So I think maybe guys are a little bit too late. But after those 3 months, I think I changed my mind a little bit. So I want to show you why. First, some changes about the talk. I think officially it was introduced that Silvan and I would give a talk. Well, Silvan couldn't make it because he thought the talk was tomorrow. Then we said we're going to talk about Java versus Kotlin. I'm not a big fan, especially in presentations, to do something versus, because for all of a sudden we end up here discussing the spaces versus top discussions, Eclipse versus IntelliJ, I don't know, whatever else. So I just want to show you what Kotlin can do for you and how it actually perfectly works together with Java. And the discussion we can do it afterwards with some drinks. We also were very enthusiastic about thinking the abstract. We thought, oh, we're going to take some Java 1.4 code, we're going to convert it to a Java 8 code, and then we're actually also going to show how it will look in Kotlin. And then we thought, but maybe we only have not that much time, so let's just skip the 1.4 because nobody is doing it anymore, and we're not really into historics, so let's just remove that. But what is the plan then for tonight? What I would like to try to do is I build a small Spring Boot 2.0 application. Maybe some quick questions before I start all this. Who has actually ever heard of Kotlin? Please keep your hand up if that's true. Who has actually read some Kotlin code? Who's actually writing some Kotlin code? Or written? And who runs it on production? That's interesting. Well, that's my previous team. I convinced them that they should actually start using Kotlin as well. So they didn't type any Kotlin, but just have a new service, which is totally empty. But there is probably some Kotlin compiler plugin configured in the com, and they actually put it into production today. But I think there's no line of Kotlin in there, is there?
Well, it returns a result of one sequence.
Okay.
But that's something.
The Spring Boot. Who's using Spring Boot? Yeah, I think that's. And one more for the check. Scala. Who's really familiar with Scala? Because I think a lot of constructs have been borrowed also from other languages, but I think. Okay. So the plan: take that application, and on the way, let's show the powers of Kotlin. How are we going to do this? I'm going to refactor that Spring Boot application. It's completely written in Java 8. And we're going to try to keep the test clean. So there are several tests that still proves that the functionality is working. This will take more than an hour, I think. So we're not going to do that. So we have to look a bit what is nice and what is not nice. So if you start falling asleep or you need a drink or whatever, then we'll just wrap it up. So please tell me if we had enough. Otherwise, we'll stop within an hour or so, 45 minutes. And then I have a quick summary of what Kotlin actually brought us. And of course the drinks, and then we can do the actual Java versus Kotlin discussions maybe if you're really interested in. So the application is about orders and order items. So it's actually really simple. We have just one order, an order ID, the date time placed, and it has one or more order items. This is the last email I'm going to show you. So let's start with the order item. Maybe first show what the application actually does. Maybe that's the application I have running here. Currently it doesn't do really much. It just exposes to a REST interface orders. So what I can do here, I have some JSON which I can post. If I currently do a call to orders on my local host, I think the ID is this, I will get a 404. Oh, it's going there. Okay, so next time I will start with the empty application, but it's already there, so I can post the application, the JSON to create the order for me, and I can retrieve it. Let's start with my domain. So we start with order item. You already see a lot of code which we don't really like about Java. I think we can agree on this. All these generated getters. It is immutable. All fields in final. You can only set them through the constructor. But we have all these getters which are just generated, except for one, this get total value, and equals, and hash code, and the toString. So who of you is actually using Lombok or immutables or stuff like that? So I think that's a really great step, and it makes really good, but I didn't add that.
It brings some issues with builder. So if you use Lombok strongly, you can find out some issues. So
yeah,
it's not so easy to use.
Lombok has a problem with Java 9 as well. So
and I'm not using 9 yet, so. But what can we do now? So the first thing we actually should do is I should add some Kotlin configuration. So I take the project and say, IntelliJ, give me some Kotlin. It will actually change my POM file.
that's the wrong one. Yeah, you did.
Really, I did?
Yes.
Thanks. Here we go. This is better. So that's also a nice feature. You can also compile to JavaScript. So what you see, what it did for me is it added 2 dependencies, one for JDK 8 specific. So Kotlin also supports some older versions of Java, like Java 6. That's why it's still able to run it on Android. And it did configure for me a compiler plugin, or the Maven Kotlin plugin, to verify that it should compile. And this should be happening before the normal Maven compiler plugin. So all the Kotlin should be compiled before Java does its thing. So let's go back to the order item. So the first thing I can do is converting is quite easy because IntelliJ just has a shortcut for it. So I can just press Command Option Shift K or something like that. And I think I'm done. So we already have some Kotlin, so the only thing I need to do is to go to all of these Java classes, press that shortcut, and I'm done converting. I think it would be really nice, but it's not that easy. And it would be actually nice that we actually understand the code that we generate. So the first thing we see is that all the fields have disappeared, and they are now behind the actual or inside the class declaration. So what it actually says, it says like this. Right, so make it a little bit more readable. It does this. It gives me a constructor and it takes all these arguments. And also let's just get rid of all these generated code because I don't want to have any generated code. And we see this other thing that we said there was not a getter, it was not doing the normal getting, but was actually calculating something for us. If you know this, let's just then remove the constructor. Something else we see here is that we're using the keyword val. We also have the keyword var. So what this actually means is that if it ever val, I can never reassign something else to it. So all the languages have it as well, right? So if I do something, and let's say it's a string, and I try to assign something to something again, finally it's going to blame to me, hey, you cannot reassign something which is a val. So the other thing is that we have a var, which I think should maybe a flag that, oh, you're using a var, do we really want to use it? But this is okay. Something else we see here is that we don't specify the type. So normally in Java you would specify the type, so you would write a string first and then something. But actually Kotlin can see that, well, we're typing a string here, so I will assume that your variables actually will type a string. But in this case I don't have an assignment, so I have to tell it the type. So I still do this with a colon, and I say the type of this field, or actually property, is type string, int, big decimal, or string. Yeah, so that's about it. Then we have some order item tests. Let's just see if this still happy. I had to write this test because we had some test coverage tools that were complaining that all the setters and getters were not tested. So, oh, it's red. Parameter specified as non-null is null. Okay, so we have something which is called nullability safety in Kotlin. So what we saw earlier in Java 8 with this optional, which you shouldn't use everywhere, I fully agree on this. But this is just baked into Kotlin. So to find out if I click, but we have this simple builder that constructs for me a order item, and we also have a promotion code, and this promotion code is by default is just no. And actually we don't require it. Not everybody that buys something as a promotion. So let's go back to our order item. So how do I tell it to be optional? I say not optional around it, but I type a question mark behind it. So in this case, I tell the compiler, this thing can be optional, or can be null. So whenever I use this promotion code, I'm forced to say that it can be null. I need to handle it to prevent some null pointer exceptions. So this hopefully fixes my test. Okay, that's good. So I think I'm more or less done now. But actually my test was not that big. In the other test for order I actually do have an equals method. But this one now doesn't have an equals or to hash, I just threw them away. There's an easy way also to check this. Because what it actually happens, it generates bytecode. And this bytecode is also just running on the JVM. Where you can actually decompile the bytecode back to Java. So if I want to see Kotlin bytecode for this class, I can give the bytecode here. Maybe not that readable, but luckily there's a decompile button. And here I get back just plain old Java. I can actually see what did the Kotlin compiler bytecode generated me, what kind of Java code did it give me. So, well, I see still my order item. Maybe one thing is final, we'll get to that later. Maybe a bit strange, I just recognize my same fields here. There's one annotation above it that it can be null, except for this one, because the object int without a question mark is always translated to a primitive in Kotlin. So we don't need annotation because it cannot be null. And this one, the promotion code, we said with a question mark, it is actually annotated with nullable. Then again, I see here my my get method. It didn't came to that, but it will generate the get method for me. But that's about it. Oh, my constructor, and you see that it has these check for null checks everywhere. Go back to order item. But I actually do want it to generate some extra stuff for me, or maybe also on Scala we have some data classes, so we just put the word data in front of it. And now it will generate a equals for me, and the hash code, and the toString, and the copy method. And it can actually do some other things like destructing, but maybe we'll come to that later. So the bytecode will look a bit different now. I'm not gonna show it again. Then maybe there's something else we can make it more Kotlin-like. Depends if you like it, but that again is a personal flavor, I think. So, but we see this multiply here. What I can do in Kotlin is I can say I just want to use a operator. So Kotlin has something that's called operator overloading. So normally we don't have this in Java, multiply big decimals. In this case, Kotlin does support it. One other thing we see here is that the big decimal, you don't need to type the keyword new in front of it. So that's, you can throw that away, the new keyword. So to actually look it up, this operator, there's actually just some code behind it. So I can also show it like this. So this is the actual function, what it does. So let's see if we can maybe somehow relate this to our Java code that we normally write. So we have a public method, but we don't say method, but we indicate it with a fun. And it's called times. So all the operators that we have some method name defined in Kotlin, which it will recognize and will translate to a operator. And then I say I get another big decimal, and I return a big decimal. And it does just do the whole trick we did before. Only this time is this. And what it is actually, this is an extension function. So what we do here, we write a function, and we say this function can be applied to all these types. So whenever I have a big decimal, I can apply this function to it. So we actually, you don't have any control over big decimal, but you can add functionality to it with extension functions. And I think extension functions are a really big thing in Kotlin, because almost everything it does, for example, its whole collection library is based on extension functions. And the other magic keyword here is operator. So this says this times is really an operator, so we can use it. Let's take
the keyword data also implies it's now mutable.
Yeah. Oh, good question. This is actually because of the val. So when I go back to my, let's do that. So order item test. This is still Java, and it's actually using my order item, right? It still runs. Nothing happens. And from here I can actually not see that it's Kotlin. But if I want to do now, for example, order item.setName, it's not there. If I do want it, I can change this to a var. If I change this, it will actually generate a setter for me as well. So I get back here, and it actually does compile. So I can now, semicolon, got that. It actually does compile. But maybe let's get back to the test first. Let's migrate the test also to Kotlin. So again, Command Shift. Okay. Wow. And now I've converted my test to Kotlin. Internal keyword which says it's internal to my module, to my main module. So I don't think it's really useful. Most of the time I'm just writing something that runs on the server, which is not a library. Well, most of the time. Well, it looks similar as it did before, right? It's still all the Java code with val. I'm using the unit 5, so what I could have done to make this method a little bit more readable, use a display name, or use some underscores in my method name. I like it when I'm writing the test names. But if we're going to use them both, it gets, well, strange, right? And then I have the same thing as my documentation is going out of sync with my method, or in this case my display name gets out of sync with my method name. So, but what you can do actually in Kotlin is I can use these ticks. And now I can just type anything. So I can do this, I can make spaces out of it, as if it was a...
Like in Spock.
Sorry?
The same like in Spock.
Yeah. I don't think they invented a lot of themselves. but they just did a really good job in stealing the stuff from other languages. Which is also really great, right? It's not stealing, even stealing puzzles from others. You can do it in the right way. It can be really nice. Yes. Let's go to my other order. Well, let's do the same trick here. So converted Kotlin. We have the Kotlin here. Ooh. I do have some messing now, I think. Well, it's complaining I don't have the binary operator. Not a functional interface. This is also going horribly wrong. I don't know. Java, Kotlin is really good in figuring out types, right? So let's just remove those types first. See what's going on now. Oh. More types. Delete it. Let me think. In Java I would write this like so. It's item, and it's a item. This is more familiar, but it still complains. If we go back to the order item test, maybe it wasn't even noticed. But we used to say here get name, but I converted to Kotlin, and now it says dot name, like I'm accessing a field. So whenever I can, it still generates getters and setters, so I can still use it from Java. But when I use it from Kotlin, it recognizes and it says don't use these getters and setters. So let's go back to the order. So I should change this just to total value, like this. I think now it's more or less green. What else can we do? I still want to optimize this. Well, let's first get rid of this, right? Maybe it's a bit of a context switch, but this will bad code, right? We don't want this. We can do data class. So I can look at this thing again. So we have these lambdas as well here. They look similar in Java, only they have curly braces. If it is the only argument, I can actually remove the outer braces. So I can actually write this. And you just saw me doing it as well. It used to say it. So when I have ever a lambda that only takes one argument, there's some convenience that it will always be called it. And it is maybe not the best correct name if you have to name things. So it may be a little bit discussion with your colleagues, so you have to find out what do you really prefer. Most of the time I actually do like it myself, because it's a bit shorter. But I can also write this notation, just leaving out brackets, if this is the last argument of my function. So in this case I reduce it with 0, and then I have this lambda again, how it should accumulate or reduce it. I can put the brackets like this. Sometimes it's useful because you can make really nice DSLs with it, or something else. You can do this. I can of course replace this again by an operator. Why not? Maybe give it a little bit better names, but yeah, it is not possible. 2 times it and it. Something else is that in Java you would write brackets around it, right? When you have more than one argument, it's not needed. It is needed in declarations of methods. But this is also some Java-like thing, stream. Can we not get rid of the stream? So I remove the stream, and this now really doesn't compile anymore. And maybe see what. So I do have a reduce function, but this reduce function only takes an operator that accumulates it. So it doesn't have a initial value. So that's fine, but it also has another method which is called fold, and that will just perfectly use it. But I'm always a little bit too much to clean code, because my product owners or business people always start complaining, I want to make your code even more clear, or command is not good enough. But I think this is maybe not good enough, especially for yeah.
Yeah, one thing to note is that with stream, each operation is lazy. So if
Yeah.
you filter map, then it's lazy and it gets only executed with the terminator analyzer.
Yeah.
With Kotlin, it's eager.
It's not lazy anymore.
Yeah.
So it's really good. So if you have a lot of operations or you have a limit in there, you have to pay attention. Do you want to have streams? So do you really need the lazy functionality? Because actually I think in most of the times you actually don't really need it. But do you need it? Then you can just use the sequences. So if you say I want it have it as a sequence, you actually get a stream-like object. I think it used to be called streams in Kotlin as well, but they renamed it to remove the confusion between Java and Kotlin. But actually what I'm doing here is I'm summing up some total amounts. What would be other way to write it down? So actually I just want to do sum, and then I see there's this sum by double function. Let's just have a look. And again, we saw this before with the operator. Only this time there's no operator keyword, but it's again a function, and it says everything with for iterable t. I define this method, this sum by double, and it takes a selector or a consumer. Well, it does return a value, right? So it takes t and it gives me back a double, and the result will actually be a double. Maybe it's actually more or less what I want. So why not just copy paste it? Go back to my order and just paste it here. See what happens. This is not really needed. Well, I want to replace all the doubles by a big decimal and this. This doesn't compile. Throw it away. Let's see what we have. We have a var. Okay. The Kotlin standard library does it right, so it should be okay. So it started with a double, but my initial value is not a double, but it was a big decimal 0. And then it does define this type. Or maybe it's a bit too much, right? Because I always say it's a big decimal, so I can remove it. And I have now something like this. Just a file. Let's maybe this also. Can I use it now? So I can say, well, it got the total value. And it does compile. Move some dev imports. Looks good, I think. I find it a bit more readable. Then this thing we can just. It's a bit of a strange thing because it's actually a top level declaration of a method which is not inside a function, method class, I have to say. But I don't think it belongs here. It's a nice thing, so I want to put it somewhere in my library. So I have to move it out, and I put it in my library. I don't know. So it's gone here, but it's still happy because it's the same package. I can easily access it. You could do the same trick for this Kotlin file, see what happens, but actually it does generate a class and puts this method in there. That's only the bytecode. Maybe let's run all the tests. I did quite some things. Just get them all off. See what happens. So I do have some Maven, some Spring integration tests. Also some Maven or comment test. I think the most important one is actually this one, which just checks my REST controller. So it creates. What does it do then? It creates an order here, puts it in there, and see if it can actually fetch it. That's the whole thing my application does. But it fails. It's actually this test, right? That fails. So what happens? It tries to deserialize this JSON, but it doesn't know how to do it. So this is one of the things you probably jump in when you start doing Kotlin or you have some JSON. But Kotlin is, I think, quite good supported also by other frameworks. Probably get to that. So first thing I would do is we have a dependency to add, which is a Jackson module for Kotlin. I took this one before, so let's hope it's in my repository loading. So I now added a Jackson module for Kotlin, so it actually does understand how those constructors are generated. And let's see what my test will do now. And hopefully, if it helps, it should be greenish now. Okay, we're all good again. Should I already stop or want to see some more? More? So this was my domain. Let's start with a simple class, right? So we have the application. With this guy, we have to migrate our application. I know the keyword now. Shortcut really good. So here we go. What happens? Looks more or less similar. I see a new keyword here, object. I also know it from Scala, but what it actually is, it creates a singleton for me. So it has this singleton pattern. How does it look like? Let's just have a look at the Kotlin bytecode. On this check again, decompile it. This guy. So again, I have my class, and it has an instance. And I can use this one. So it does have a static, which is the instance itself, so it is singleton. And I do have the main method here. And it is static, but because this is static, it's maybe go back. It's of this annotation. But this does have some problems. Trying to write it. What else see we? Oh, we see here an array. So arrays are a little bit different in Kotlin. And it is actually just an object. But to use it or to pass them on as var, we actually use some kind of spread operator, which is this star here. So it will actually make it a var. But for time reason, I will try to let's do this. We'll just make it a normal class. Let's remove this as well. Let's define this on the top level, singular, and then I can remove this empty body. And it still complains, and it complains about that it's final. We saw that again, right? In generating bytecode, it's final, and Spring most of the times doesn't really like final classes because it wants to do proxy them with some nice more magic. So in this case, what we actually have to tell it is that it should be open. So whenever I use open, it will actually don't generate that final. So that the default is the other way around than in Java. Okay, good. So let's go to the order service. So I have a service, which is again really simple. It has a order repository, and it takes us into constructor injection. And then I have another one that says find order, which gives me a optional order because, well, maybe it's not there in the database. And I want to save it. Okay. This doesn't sound complicated. Again, convert it. Do that. What's happening here? This constructor, we saw that before. Now data classes is just a way to define constructors. But you can also annotate them as normal constructors. Only you have to place it in between. But actually, in this case, we're using Spring 5, so it knows when there's only one default constructor. It will always use that one to auto-wire. So it don't need this annotation. And then I can also get rid of the constructor. It complains again.
You can also use transactional read only on find order. It improves the performance of your JPAs.
True. So I actually want this right, and then maybe even can say that it should be read only, right? So I mean something like this for performance reasons. That's a good suggestion, I think. So I have to type this open again. Well, in this case, I only have, I have a resource or a REST controller, a service, and a repository and an application, so I don't have to open that much. But one of the things we did wrong when we were migrating, we typed open, or wrong, I think we did it wrong. We typed open everywhere, but then we forgot some functions to open, and all of a sudden we were getting null pointers on production. We're using Kotlin. How can we get null pointers? So what happens if you don't use the open? It will not be not in your proxy. So it will use the original one, and that one doesn't have the dependencies in that. So it will just call it. So to avoid this issue and to have to type open every time again. Let's go to our com file again, where our Kotlin plugin is, and I want to add another dependency, which is called bad at remembering this kind of stuff. So here it is, the Kotlin Maven all open plugin. So I can say just use this thing. And this should be using my Kotlin version. Well, actually have like this version. So they have some there. Okay, just do save. And I do need to specify that I want to use this compiler plugin. So I have compiler plugins, which has a compiler plugin. And it says I want to use Spring. And what this will do, it will actually recognize all the Spring annotations, like service, repository, REST controller, and it will open up those classes for me. So it will change the default. So now I go back to my order service. It should not complain anymore. It's gone. And I also can take my application. It actually says, why did you type open? It's not needed anymore because you're using this compiler plugin. So let's get back to my service. Well, this more or less looks okay, right? Everything's strange here. Maybe the optional is maybe. I actually want to use the question mark, but for now let's not use it already because I have to migrate all these things. Companion object. This is also something interesting. So Kotlin doesn't really have statics. And to do have them, you have to define a companion object. And in here, you can actually define stuff that is static. To really, I'm not going to dive into now because you saw it again with the application as well. You have to annotate it with JVM static if you really want to have that method as a static method, be able to call it in Java. But this is the construct they use. What do we else have for the repository? How I'm doing? Time-wise? Shall I do this class just and then run the test and then wrap it up, or is that okay? And have some drinks? Okay, let's do it again. Convert it, and we're done. This time, this class didn't use constructor injection, but it used just field injection. Auto-wired, and it generates something like this for me. So I get the auto-wired private val. So it is a val, I like it, but it's null. I don't want it to be null. So remove this. But it's complaining because I have to assign it a value. Because it's a value, I have to do something. I know that trick. Let's make it far. It's still not really happy because it always wants to have a value immediately when I declare the variable. But I don't have it here yet. So the only way I can do is assign null to it, but then I again have to add a question mark. Because when I do this, it doesn't like it. So there's another option. IntelliJ tells me add the late init modifier. Here we have another modifier. So I can do this, and this actually tells Kotlin. I didn't initialize this variable right now, but believe me, it will be done later by some framework. And when I'm going to call it, I tell you it's not going to be null. I'm not really a huge fan of this construct because I try to avoid some vars. This overhead of another late in it is a bit. So I think the most easy way is just to, just as we did with the other one, we can get rid of the outer wire. Just use the constructor injection, and I can also make it val. Okay, let's continue. See this GVC template I'm using here? It has some exclamation marks behind it. This was because of initially when we generate the class, it said it can be nullable. There was this question mark behind the type. Whenever I use that type, I have to handle that it can be null. And with exclamation mark, it's actually saying I'm not handling it. Believe me, it's always non-null. So it's actually calling the get on optional, right? It will throw me another null pointer in the face if I do this, so I still don't really resolve the problem. But we remove the question mark, so I can actually remove those, or remove the question mark, so I can remove the exclamation marks. Then I see another hint here. Lift the return out of the try. So what I see here, I have two branches, and in this branch there's a return, and here is a return as well. Statements like the try or if are expressions in Kotlin. So they actually do return a value. So it's a more functional approach. So I can get it out and just write it down like this. And actually what I want is, let's now do it. Take the time. I don't want it to be optional, but I want it to be a type that can be null, an order that can be null. So I can just throw away the optional here and just type the null in. It will give some compile problems, I think. Oh, this is another one that I didn't expect. Context switch, sorry about that. Some exclamation marks, you can remove them. So what we do here, if we put some arguments in there, but remember the promotion code? It was also a string with a question mark. And I'm saying here I have a hash map with string and any, and both of them cannot be null. I'm telling that here, but this promotion code it can be null. Most of the time it actually is null. So it's complaining about that. I can fix that to say, well, this any can also be null. But then to the compiler problems I do expect is here. So we have this find by ID. And this now returns an order question mark. But I don't want to change this now, because then I also have to refactor Kotlinify the resource, the REST controller. So for now I'm just going to say I'm going to return this, and then we have this operator. So whenever it's not null, it will actually apply it. Oh yeah, you're right. So we have this let, for example, and this is like the map option. You can see it like that. So in this case, I actually want to return a optional of it. So this says when it actually does have a value, wrap it in optional. And now I have to handle the case when it is null. And I say, okay, then just return a optional empty, right? So I'm still compliant with my interface, but I'm now using a resource that is more using Kotlin type system. Back to the resource, because everything should be nice. Oh, it's being used more in my tests. Okay, let's do quickly. So it's not this. Well, just return orders. I'm not gonna change my test to Kotlin now, so just say it's gonna be this. And I don't want to check if it's present, but it should not be not null. I can remove this gets or something like this. You get the same issue. Probably it can also help, right? Changes. Do a read border and say it's not empty, but in this case it should be no. So should this fix it? So some mocking. It also can give some nice challenge, but we will not do that today. Okay. So get back to the order repository. I think I'm going to show two more things and then wrap it up, because I can actually do a lot of this here. One thing is I want to show the support that not only Kotlin gives you, but also the community. So Spring supports since Spring 5 also, they do support Kotlin. And how do they support it? They provide you with extension functions. So they actually do the most of Kotlin does itself do. It provides you with a set of extension functions, so it can be actually easier to start using it. And one of them is they have something for DBC operations. That's why this looks maybe a bit weird. But I don't have to specify the actual type that comes here. So I can remove that, and then see it doesn't really work, but I can import this. Here it is, query function. You can actually look it up, and it's coming from the Spring framework. So they're giving me an extension function that I can use this query for object of any JDBC operations, and I only have to pass in a string without specifying which type it will actually use. But this type is here, so it also uses reified and in combination with inline. I'm gonna go into that now. It can actually figure out that this T for me. So I don't have to say it's int. You can do that now. But that was no problem, because this thing returns a T question mark, and I have int here, so that is not compatible. So I have to tell it when this thing is null, then just return a null. One more thing, if you have just one expression in there, you can actually, if you do it on the return, you can convert to an expression body. So I can get rid of the whole curly braces. The body, I just have it on one line. That works fine. I can continue now in half an hour, but I think this is, hopefully it demonstrates the Kotlin. I will make sure this repo becomes available somewhere, and also contains a branch with all the Kotlin code in there, which I think is idiomatic Kotlin, or whatever you call it. Typing, we just did that. Oh, do I need to preview the test roll? Maybe just start the test, and then I'm going to make it hopefully all green. So a quick summary of what Kotlin brings. I think it works really, really well with Java together. I think it's actually a little bit more, but it's some extension functions on top of Java. And it has some other nice features. But the way I can use it from Java and the other way around works pretty well. Well, the most of the things I think here we have seen. There's another expression like the when. It's like advanced switch, which has some pattern matching. I'm not sure if you can call it like that. String templates or raw strings, I'm really a favorite of that. We didn't see them, so we can just use the variables inside your string. Something else we didn't see, which I think makes the language or the compiler really smart, is smart cast or null check. So whenever I do a check, if this variable is an instance of this class, further on in the code it actually knows that I did that cast. So I don't, if I set inside an if or something, I did check is this type, then further on it knows that it is actually that type, otherwise I wouldn't have ended up in that branch. So it uses that information, so I don't have to cast it again. Yeah, some stuff we didn't see, like sealed classes and type aliases, destructuring decorations. there's a lot more to discover, I think, and nice features. Was it all good? Yeah, it was. But no, maybe there are some cons. It is a new language, and that brings some overhead. So you have to learn it. You have to understand it bit by bit. You will make mistakes, like you still have null pointers in production, or you don't use open or stuff like that. We have more of them. You have to decide with your team. Maybe for Java, I think it's pretty common, right? You just use your IntelliJ or whatever, use that style guide. But now we have maybe new discussions. How are we going to use this? If it's a single expression, are we always going to convert it to an expression body? Or do we still keep the old school way? One of my pains was support for Eclipse. I was always using Eclipse. Now to convert to IntelliJ. It's the Eclipse. There is an Eclipse plugin, but when I checked it out 4 months ago or so, there was not a commit for a year or so. So I think it's pretty much that. That's also a concern for me, because that's one of the reasons Kotlin, IDE, and IntelliJ also same company. And I think they actually said it's one of the reasons we want to sell more of our IDE by getting Kotlin big. I think it's a good selling point, but the other way is maybe also a bit tricky. Companion objects, I don't, especially when you have these loggers. For me, it's just typing more code to get something static. Mocking frameworks, we saw that before. I was using this example Mockito. Most of the assertions, they return null. If I do assert, this must be any string, like in Homecrest or CJ, and it will actually return null. But the method call says you should not return null. So it will actually not work. There are some, for Mockito, for example, there's also an extension that tries to remove that burden. But,
what about static code analysis or so?
Yeah, I think one of the great benefits of Kotlin is that the support by IntelliJ is really good. And also, I think the guys that actually developed Kotlin are not some post-academics or that want to create a really nice language, but they have production into mind. So they want to solve some problems, like all the generated code from Java, null pointers. Let's get rid of that thing. So I think they have in mind that we should be productive. I think that's the great view. So that's quite good, I think.
Does Sonar support Kotlin?
I don't know. We don't use it. So maybe. It just generates bytecode Java. So maybe if it would be on that level, if you have some type checking on the bytecode level, it will work. I don't know. I do think it's here to stay. I did say that about Scala also, but I think it has more chances to survive. Also, already seeing support like the Jackson modules, Mockito jumping in Spring, and also a recent the Android platform that sees it, or Google sees it as a primary language on their platforms. And I think that the migration is quite easy. Well, you just press a shortcut and you have to change a few things, and almost works. Some background links. I do think there's really good documentation on it. Also, if you look on recent what are the top languages that are being used, or you can see that I think, especially the last 2-3 months, the searches for Kotlin and community is really making, is really going forward.
Is first compile to Java and then to bytecode, or immediately to bytecode?
Immediately to bytecode, as far as I know. So, that's it. Thank you very much. I hope you can use it when you start converting your project tomorrow to Kotlin, or at least start using it. I think you should. And let's have some drinks.